Hey, I want to welcome our viewers to Kennesaw Happenings podcast. I'm Golfer Pete, and we have in our studio a special guest. And so I want to thank Tony first off for telling us about Keith and really helping us to get him on the show. So Keith, tell us who you are, what you do, and who you serve, and then we'll get going in the podcast.
Sure. I'm Keith Norman. I'm Lucille's husband, Jalen Blake's father. And I serve as lead servant / pastor at a church called The Factory in Woodstock, Georgia. We're celebrating 10 years, January 14th.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. So what would you say, like, when you say 10 years, how did you get to that 10-year mark where you're serving and being the pastor of your church?
Well, I gave my life to Christ in 1987. Mm-hmm. I moved to Chicago from Georgia, went to college there, decided to be a youth ministry major, and really just saw ministry after that. I did youth ministry, worship ministry. I was a worship pastor for a while, and just always felt a passion to pastor or serve at a church that was multi-ethnic. And I felt like God was calling me. I ran from it for years. And then I just got tired of running. And I said, hey, if I want a multi-ethnic church, why not just obey God and plant one? So we started it in my living room, 12 years ago. And then we grew and opened up Sunday morning services.
That's so what would you say for our viewers to understand your journey better? What's the biggest challenge that in starting a church and really in the living room and then obviously into, your church building? What was your challenges that you could share with our viewers?
That's an easy one. Fear. The guy that I looked at in the mirror every day, I didn't believe in. And that's at times still a struggle for me, the things that the Lord makes clear that he wants me to do. I feel inadequate to do them. But then I look at other people in the Bible, almost everybody that he called, they felt those sense of inadequacy often. So I'm not alone. But yeah, the biggest obstacle was I just never thought I could do it. I didn't feel worthy. But I listen. It calls me to pray more. It calls me to listen for him more and just seek his word. And the flip side of that is I believe everything about him that I've read about him. And so I felt like if I just kept putting things in his hand, that I would be fine. And I still operate that way, understanding the last thing I pray every single sermon is, Lord, help me to decrease and I want you to increase. And that's kind of how we operate, not just on Sundays, but every day.
How do you minister to your staff? Because obviously your staff is connected to, your congregation and the members. What are you doing there that our viewers can understand a little bit better?
Well, I try my best to be there for them. They have access to me 24/7. Call. I go to breakfast with guys. And the staff, we have a Christmas dinner, kind of end of the year dinner Friday, where I'll just thank them, do my best just to stay available. I will be honest, right now I'm working on a PhD and I could not be any busier. So it's more of a struggle right now to balance my schedule. But overall, I'm a people person. So I go to lunch with them and talk, laugh and joke and just try to be available. And I'm one that believes in teaching scripture. Like I text the team often, just stuff that I read in the morning, things that minister to me. I texted them yesterday. I'm reading through the Bible and I texted them just in the book of Esther, God's name isn't mentioned once. And I was reading it and I laughed and I was like, man, God's providence is all over this book, but his name is nowhere. Then I turned to Job and God's name is chapter 1. You constantly see it. He's talking to Satan. You see his name, but you can easily miss his providence. So I was like, you go from one book to the next. One, his providence is conspicuous, his name inconspicuous. to the next book, his name is conspicuous and his providence seemingly inconspicuous. Stuff like that excites me. I share it. I just share it. So I do a lot of that. But I would be honest, we have some new staff members, and I've told them this when I hired them, I would be a bit frustrated with me now because school, PhD is a lot.
Yes.
And so I can't be as available as I would like to be. It's just not even possible. Even in my own home, I'm there, but you have to do the work. And I understand that it's just a season. I have a year and a half to go. And that's hard for me. At the end of the day, I'm a people person. I love people, but right now it's about sitting in front of books and writing and reading and writing. And it's an ongoing process, but I signed up for it.
Yeah. I mean, I love growth. And so what went into your thought or prayer or just your journey? Why did you take that step to do a PhD?
Wow. I've wanted a PhD for probably 23 years. When I lived in Chicago, my boss, who was also my mentor when I was in college, would encourage me to get my master's degree. He really wanted to give me a promotion that required a master's. And I would think about it. I took a few classes, but when my wife got pregnant with our last kid, I was advised to, kind of be there for her. But the thought of getting more education never left me. I tried to kind of move on from it, and I just thought I forgot about it for years. I was called to my alma mater to preach 2 years in a row. The first year I preached one chapel. The second year I preached 5 days in a row, which is unheard of. And to see the interaction that I had with the students, the access that I had to them, I knew then that I wanted those doors available to me, which oftentimes means you got to get more education to be on college campuses. So I prayed about it. I mean, years went by and it just wouldn't leave me. And I prayed a specific prayer, and I won't give you that prayer. And God answered it. It was a kind of a silly prayer, a ridiculous prayer, kind of like, who was it? Gideon. And God answered it. And so I took that door. You rewind, I went to Israel a few years ago. It's 2017. And I didn't know anybody I went with. My wife and I went. We were part of a group from Anderson University. We didn't know we were going to be a part of that group. So I got to know some of the professors, preached at Anderson. And then one of the professors challenged me, hey, since you like studying so much, why not get credit for it? Why not come here? And so that's what I did. I got my master's from there, and now I'm getting my PhD in preaching from there. And at the end of the day, like I told my dissertation supervisor, I knew that the PhD would be an arduous task. It's harder than I even anticipated. I got into it not so much to be an expert. Technically, I'm going to be considered an expert when I'm done. I got into it because I want to influence young people. And I knew that I needed certain credentials to get in certain doors. And so that's really my why. I want to influence people. When I preached at my alma mater years ago, the second year when I got 5 days, I walked onto the stage for my first sermon. A young Caucasian lady in the back row yelled out, "Where are your Timberland boots?" And I got it. The year before, I used my Timberland boots as an object lesson. And people who were there remembered it, and the chapel erupted. But it kind of showed me my vision for ministry is I want to minister to anybody that has a pulse, anybody. I don't care the skin color. I don't care if they disagree with my points of view. And that young lady was representative of that. And so I was like, I'm going to do all I can to get back into these environments.
That's awesome. What would you say? You mentioned youth, and Tony, who told me about yourself and your book. We'll get to that in just a second. What do you think the challenges are with youth today? that you feel that you would like to minister, talk, work with, communicate? What do you see in your eyes?
Oh, it's the challenge of our generation, period, not just youth. We're disconnected. You and I are sitting in front of a computer.
Mm-hmm.
We're connected in so many ways. We have so many devices that have kind of become vices.
Mm-hmm.
So we're so disconnected. I used to take my daughter out, who's now 25 years old. We used to go out every Tuesday for years. It was our date night.
Mm-hmm.
And this was 23, 24 years ago, and I would sit with her and notice we were the only two people engaged. And you'd see families together, but kids were on their devices. Or I remember once we were at the mall in the food court, and this whole family is sitting there, and all the kids are looking up at the TV. Nobody is really talking. I think just being disconnected, you think about it when I don't even know you, but growing up, we watched TV with our mom and dad. We watched, the Waltons or Good Times or Sanford and Son, and we were all in one room. We had one TV. Now kids are in their rooms on their devices watching, whatever they're watching. Mom's in a room, dad's in the man cave, and we're disconnected. I think that's a huge problem. And the other thing is, oftentimes we're afraid of kids, adults. We're afraid to engage them in genuine conversation. And we fail to keep one of our feet in our adolescence and one in adulthood. We don't know how to straddle the line well. And I catch myself falling prey to that myself with my son, who's 21 years old. Sometimes I want to kind of fuss at him or discipline him, failing to realize he's me. He's what I used to be, but what I am now sometimes. So I try to remember to keep my foot in adolescence, but also in adulthood. And I think sometimes we're afraid to do that. But for me, I got a call last night from a school right around here, Mount Perrin Christian School. They want me to preach at a chapel in February. My schedule is too busy, but right away I email my secretary, talk to my wife. I'm going to do everything in my power to make that chapel because I want to be in those environments. Gotcha. I love that teenagers, they don't know how to fake well. I think we need that, but adults are afraid of that.
Yep.
You and I, we could sit here and kind of lie to each other, not be truthful. Youth don't do that very well.
Yeah, no,
and I find that refreshing.
No, I do. That it's you hear it's the innocence of growing up. We haven't formulated a lot of the things that society and culture shapes in our minds about things, and so we're just open, like an open book or a sponge. What would you say, like, for our viewers to understand, who influenced you in writing the book? I mean, Tony shared it with me. Who was a big influence?
That's an easy one. That's my father. My father just died. What is it? December. He just died. I think it was September. And he was 99 years old. The greatest person I know. Not just the greatest father. I know no one that even comes close to him. And I know a lot of good people. I'm married to a great person. My children are great. I pastor great people. I've met big name people in ministry. Gotten to have lunch with one of the preachers that I've respected for 30 years. And he was better than I expected, but even he doesn't compare to my father. My father at 99 years of age, he was always old as a parent, but he couldn't put a noun and a verb together to save his life. He wasn't very educated, but so all he knew was the Lord. And it wasn't just his talk in the home, it was his consistency. In his walk, he knew nothing about the stock market. He couldn't talk economics. He could talk politics. He chose not to. He just loved everybody. And so I got to see a man. I didn't like this growing up, who was just on fire for the Lord. It was so consistent. As a kid growing up, I didn't like that. Our tagline at the church that I pastor is the other 6 days. We don't want to simply be about an hour and a half service. That's actually hilarious if you think that you're going to have an effect that way. And my dad, I didn't know this. He modeled that. With my brothers and I loved hanging with my father. We were all close to my dad. And so I'm a preacher. I got to eulogize him, but truthfully, any of my brothers could have done it, and we could have done it with no notes.
Right.
So just the picture of consistency. I was a youth ministry major. I was a youth pastor years ago, and that was the number one complaint of kids when they came in my office, one-on-one meetings. They thought their parents were fake. It ticked them off to see mom and dad lifting hands during praise and worship, and then they were something else at the house. Well, I never had that struggle. I didn't know it. I didn't know how blessed I was because it was all I knew until I went off to college. And I went to a pretty wealthy college. And I was a part of a small group for one of my classes. We met the entire year of the same small group. I was the only person in that small group that was close to my parents. And I'm just being transparent here. I was African American. It was a wealthy, white, Christian, conservative school. I was the only African American in the small group. And I grew up thinking Caucasians had everything. They lived on the other side of town where I grew up, and I learned, man, I've got more than they have because I loved my father. My mom was the disciplinarian, but I loved her as well, and I had them in my life. And so, my dad is the number one influence of my life to this day. He's only been dead a couple of months, but he and my mom, we were kind of blessed to have nothing. And because they only taught us what they knew, and what they knew was God.
What I'm warms my heart hearing that, and and I think hearing that more often helps us out there. What would you say when you wrote this book? What was we'll put a link to the book in the show notes, but what was your thoughts in kind of putting all that together, and how difficult was it when you wrote this book?
Your last question makes me laugh. It's almost like you know me. That question, it was extremely difficult. And it goes back to an earlier question you asked about the heart, the difficulties of planning a church. I just felt insecure about me. I know that once you write a book, you put it out, you're open to criticism. And one of the guys that I wanted to endorse the book, he emailed me just a long criticism of the book. And so I was working on the book for years, just because I was afraid. I could have had the book written earlier. And then, I don't normally talk like this, but I felt the Lord kind of put in my heart, stop trying to write a literary gem and write a life guide. Just tell the truth about your dad. And that's what I did. At the end of the day, I'm trying to see, Malcolm Gladwell is probably my favorite author. I like Donald Miller, who wrote Blue Like Jazz. I'm not those guys. I'm not James Baldwin. I like reading his stuff. I just wanted the world to know about my father. And so even recently, I wrote that book. It came out in 2017. I just got an email from someone who just started reading it, and they said it had already impacted them, and they were just in chapter 1. And so it all, if you think about it, there's kind of a theme here. You have to face your fears. And one of the things I've seen a therapist for the last 4 years, he's told me to stop playing small. I think I worry about criticism so much rather than sticking to purpose. So the hard part, I'm a pretty disciplined person. I've been up since 5 o'clock this morning work, and that's common for me. But so it wasn't getting up early in the morning writing the book. I typically would write in the morning. At the time, my kids were smaller, and I tried to work before anybody got up. That part was not hard. But saying, okay, somebody's not going to like this book. In the world that we live in today now, if you post something on Twitter, Facebook, in the threads, you're going to see the criticism.
Yes.
And so I'm learning, even as a pastor, I can't get caught up into that. I don't even go on social media much now. Some of that is the reason. It's just everybody is negative. And I just want to, I told my wife last night, we want to always rise above that.
Mm-hmm.
The flip side of that, we probably should engage more to put positive stuff on. So yeah, the hard part wasn't sitting down and writing. I had no clue that all of the reading I've done over the years, I love to read. I'll read whole books in a day. I had no clue that it was preparing me for the PhD and also for writing that book, because to be disciplined, I don't want to brag, but I'm pretty good at that. There was a time I wasn't, but I had no clue when I would get up years ago and just read whole books. Malcolm Gladwell's last book, Bomb and Mafia. On my off day, I just said, I'm going to read a couple of chapters. I read the book from cover to cover. And what happens is that prepares you for the discipline needed to do the work.
Totally agree.
It was my insecurity, though. That was my obstacle.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with our viewers, because fear has a way of really shaping our decision process. And so it keeps us from things. Now, from the start to the end, what would you say that journey of writing the book? Was it a year, 2 years? What would you think when you started the first chapter and you started writing? Give our viewers an idea.
3 years. So, and I just stopped because I said, I'm not an author. I'm not good. And my therapist, who I've never met face to face, we've only Zoomed. I went to him, if I can be transparent, for sin struggles. I don't like sin, but yet I commit sin. And from almost day one, he never would talk to me about my sin issues. And he would say, you play too small. People need what you do. And I heard this for 4 years. I just recently stopped going to him. And so I would just play small. Well, I'm not Malcolm Gladwell, just be you. And so I think it took me that long because of insecurity. Once I got over that, and then again, the first guy that I asked to endorse it, I knew he had written several books. He trashed it. And I was driving from Chicago alone, and my phone is going off. Another guy who's written one of my favorite books, I won't say his name, he texted me. I pulled over at a gas station. We talked, and he said, this book's amazing. He said, I'm gonna make it. He pastors a mega church, I think 6,000 people. And he wrote a book that was amazing. He said, I'm gonna make it require reading for especially the men at our church. And so literally within a few hours, I get somebody who thinks it's not good, and I get somebody who made it recommended reading for people at his church. And at the end of the day, the lessons for me is you can't worry about what happens on the other end of what your assignment is.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's just a struggle for me. But I saw a counselor for years for it. I'm honest with the elders at the church, and especially my wife. I want to push through all of those insecurities and fears. When I look at myself and what I do, I shared this not Sunday past, but the Sunday before. If I can be called a pastor, God can call anybody. So the things that make me insecure are actually my tools of testimony.
Man, I love this. I just meeting you for the first time, half hour ago, is really what resonates is your transparency with our viewers, and just that, to speak from the heart and just really share, I think we all struggle to a certain degree with fear and insecurities, but as guys, I'm just speaking for our guys, because that's what we cover it up, because we're, macho. It's like, hey, I got big muscles and I can plow through anything, but we do have those built in, and we're dealing with them every day. What would you like our viewers to leave? We always let our guests share what insight can they take away from their time with you?
Oh man, I like you because your questions are easy for me. It's almost like you knew me and you don't. The easy thing for me, if I had to leave your viewing audience with one thing, is embrace grace.
Mm-hmm.
I shared that with my wife the other day. I'm a pastor, so there's an expectation of me, and it's always a flawed expectation. People either are really upset with me because I didn't preach something they like, or they put me on a pedestal. It's rarely an in between.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my wife there are many mornings that I just get up in my prayer. I had a prayer altar at my house for years. I
Mm-hmm.
recently got rid of it, but there are many mornings I would put my head on it. I would lie rather than kneel. And I would just say, Lord, I embrace your grace today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to try to dot every I, cross every T. I wasn't raised that way, and I'm not criticizing my church. I'm grateful for my church. I was raised kind of to be a Pharisee. I think I've taught some of that as well, and I'm sad about that. We do it unwittingly. But I just embrace God's grace, which means that I do try to live a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't try to live a certain way first. I live from grace, not for grace. And so that would be my advice to people. Embrace God's grace for you. I don't care who's watching. I'm a Christian,
Mm-hmm.
but some people, I hope some people are watching this that are not Christian.
Mm-hmm.
God's grace is still for them.
Mm-hmm.
If you got up this morning, you experienced brand new mercy. So even if you don't believe what I believe, if you would embrace God's grace, that's number one. But number two, if you would start giving grace.
Yeah.
Again, we live in a world. If you go on Twitter, I could go on Twitter today and just type, the sky it's a beautiful blue sky. Somebody's going to come in and say, no, it's not. The sky is gray. And then somebody's going to repost what they put.
Yeah.
And to me, we need to give grace.
Yes.
I'm a pretty confrontational guy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a side of me that people won't see today. I'm pretty laid back, but when I believe something,
Mm-hmm.
I won't physically fight, but I'll fight to see something to the end.
Yeah.
And my wife recently has been in about 3 meetings with me. We've known each other since 1987.
Mm-hmm.
One meeting I was in, somebody just erupted. It was like a volcano. The whole room looked, and it was a room full of people. One of the people in the room said, we all expected you to do something. I had peace just to let this person erupt.
Right.
My wife went with me just a couple of days later to a meeting, and somebody shared with me they had been mad at me, really upset at me. I was shocked. And my wife says, man, I was proud of you. You just held your peace.
Mm-hmm.
The same person that was mad at me texted me Sunday talking about how they love me. And how I've been a cheerleader. Mm-hmm. And my point to my wife, what if I had erupted on them? Yeah. I gotta extend grace to them. I didn't agree with anything they said about me, but I was thinking the whole time, what if 1% of what they're saying about me is true? Because in case your viewers don't know it, I'm not perfect. So I don't want to just receive God's grace. I want to give it. Mm-hmm. I'm having breakfast in the morning with a golfer, and you would love him. And I'm really not very political. I don't want to lose viewers, but I don't put my full support in either party. Mm-hmm. This gentleman, he definitely embraces one party, and it's obvious. Mm-hmm. I don't like a lot of his posts. He almost lost his job. Human Resources called him in for some of his posts, but I'm not going to stop being his friend. Mm-hmm. And I've told him that, and that's just extending grace. Yes. And I get to teach him. He confronted me at a breakfast. We were going golfing one morning, mm-hmm. and our food hadn't even come. And before our food came, he spoke some things he disagreed with some of my preaching. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't expecting that. And I just told him why. I gave him my why. And I said, we will never bend towards man's law over moral law. Moral law. So I don't know you, but God's moral law tells me to love you.
Mhm.
Man's law will tell me, well, he ain't black or whatever, or he ain't voting for the same person you're voting for.
Yep.
And we get lost in that. And, or, he likes Alabama and you cheer for UGA or whatever it
Mhm.
is. And I don't believe in that. I think we give grace. When you look at the mess that you're interviewing me now because somebody recommended me,
Mhm.
the reality is this person doesn't see a fake pastor. I'm not a fake, but I'm so imperfect. So yes, I preach on Sundays, but then I have to get on my knees sometimes, literally crying because, okay, I just sinned again.
Mhm.
So for me not to give you grace is pretty arrogant of me. If I was perfect, I shouldn't have to give you grace.
Mhm.
I don't know of anybody that is.
Oh yeah, it's we all are in that same boat. It's just how we deal with it. And I like how you have shared with our viewers, just that understanding of grace and giving grace. Because yeah, I don't really see it out there.
No.
It's like you're on one side, I'm on the other side, and it's almost like
Bifurcated lives,
yeah.
bifurcated humanity. My wife and I were in Boston in
Hmm.
October. I went there for a consortium, and the church decided to send my wife, and I was happy about that for
Hmm.
Pastors Appreciation Month. They gave us 3 or 4 extra days.
Hmm.
Our last day, I like shopping. I love shoes, and
Hmm.
I Googled certain stores because I know every city has a certain street
Yeah.
that I like. And so my wife and I were walking the street, window shopping. We bought nothing. And we come out of New Balance store, found a pair of shoes in there I liked. I said, I'll research and get a cheaper price. We're walking, the street is packed, and there's a palm reader psychic lady. Well, I don't align with her beliefs. And right away, and she just kind of popped up on us. She was sitting at a table similar
Uh-huh.
to this on a busy street, and she wanted to read my palm. And right away, I knew that I disagreed with her.
Hmm.
And I started praying without her knowing it inside. Lord, help me not to try to beat her up.
Hmm.
Help me not to try to run over her. And I just calmly said, ma'am, I believe in Jesus Christ. So I don't even really need this Jesus. And I just talked about Jesus, and I was praying while talking inside.
Hmm.
And I offered Jesus to her, and I was expecting her to fight me. And that's what I'm praying against. I don't want to fight with her.
Right.
I believe I could destroy her verbally, but I don't. Why? Why would I
Yeah.
do that? So I'm praying. Here's what happened. She started crying. Yeah, I'm
Oh,
talking. It was powerful, and I'm not talking.
yeah.
I mean a passionate cry. I've never done this before. Something I believe the
Yeah.
Spirit told me, take her hand and hold it. My
Oh,
wife and I held her hand and talked to her and about Jesus Christ, and told her that she could have him. Just I don't even remember everything I
yeah.
said, but she never fought me. She melted literally in my hands, and my wife kept saying, "You could see Jesus's authority." And it hit me maybe 2 weeks later. I held the hand of a
Yeah.
lady who reads hands.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, I
right.
didn't even
Yeah,
think of
that's
that.
crazy.
And I
Yes.
would not normally
Yeah.
hold a lady's hand that I don't
Right.
know. My
Yeah.
wife was there. We gave her a card, and I went back the next day. Our flight left the next day. I said, I'm going to look for her. And I said, I kind of hope I don't see her. And I
Mhm.
didn't, I couldn't find her on that street. And I'm believing that because I didn't fight her, I
Yeah.
gave her grace. I'm believing that she'll know the God of grace. I
Yeah.
only could give her grace because the very morning that I saw her, I only woke up because of grace. I only
Hmm.
woke up because of mercy. I don't care how many places I preach or,
Hmm.
you've talked about my book, which I'm thankful for. All of it is grace. I
Hmm.
do nothing in and of myself, and I mean nothing.
Oh man, we could talk. I know I could talk to you a lot longer, and I know as a pastor, the time restraints on studying and doing what you're doing to nurture and shepherd your flock. So tell our viewers how they can get a hold of you. So we'll put that out
Sure. The
there.
church that I pastor is called The Factory.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to our website, our Facebook page, our YouTube page. We're in Woodstock, Georgia. 9872 Main Street. I do have a website, Keith Norman Ministries. But if you really, I only got the website because I wrote the book and I needed a website. I don't really like to promote myself, but the factory is the best place to find me.
Okay.
We're all about the other 6 days. We're all about helping the poor and making disciples. So that's the best way to find me. Facebook, Instagram, through the church.
Well, thank you, Keith. I appreciate you coming and taking the time to come here. And I want to thank Tony for sharing your name with us. That would be a great guest. And Tony hit a home run again.
Wow.
Because he's just the kind of guy that's always serving, always talking, always engaging, always having conversations with people. And so I appreciate him just letting us know about yourself. And maybe next year, I'd love you to get more into your book and the story behind that.
Sure.
I mean, I know the story behind it, but more for our viewers to understand that the impact that your dad made on you as a person today.
I love that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Keith.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
you being here.